Welcome to the programme. Tonight, survivors of the Bondi attack share their stories. A mother describing the moment she shielded her 5-year-old daughter from gunfire. Also coming up, one of the shooters legally owned 6 firearms. Now the nation's leaders pledged to tighten gun laws.
I just cannot understand the rationale to justify people in Sydney having access to firearms. 1, let alone 6.
The events of Sunday evening will be forever seared into the memory of one Bondi family. Jessica Chapnick-Khan and her 5-year-old daughter were at the Hanukkah festival when it was attacked. Her son and husband ran to find them. This is their confronting story. Adam Harvey reports.
Late on Sunday afternoon, Jessica Chapnick-Khan made a last-minute decision to take her 5-year-old daughter, Shemi, to the park beside the Bondi Pavilion.
My husband mentioned, oh, there's a Hanukkah party on, and she was like, yes, I want to go. She was so excited, like she was giddy with excitement. We walked in and it was really joyful. There were so many children. And we went straight to get our special Jewish donuts that are traditional for Hanukkah. And when we went straight to the petting zoo, and she was just giggling and patting and found a little goat, and she was like delighted. It was literally 1 minute after patting the little goats that I heard the first shot. Everything kind of went slow motion in that moment, and I looked at the crowd and I saw people smiling, looking up, and I clocked in just that second, they think it's fireworks, and it's not. I just had that sense. But I quickly realised that if I was upright, we were moving targets, and I followed the crowd and we all dove into a pit with all our children beneath us.
Did you say anything to Shemi?
Initially I didn't. I just was doing everything in my power to make sure that my body was covering her entire body. I had other children at my legs and I was trying to put my legs over them, and other people. It was a tangle, an absolute tangle of bodies. And as I heard the shots get closer, I was thinking, God, I just don't want her to have to crawl out from underneath my dead body. I kept saying to her, get down as much as you can, Shemi. I realised that she hadn't been moving for a really long time. All the other children were moving and crawling, and I thought I'd suffocated her. And I said to her, Shemi, are you breathing? And I just heard her sob, a little sob. It was tiny, but I could feel like her body convulsing and her little cry. And I just said, Shemi, go into your heart, Baba. Go into your heart right now where the love is, and just stay there. Listen to Mama, just stay there, because I knew she'd know how to do that. And I did not want her to die out there with the horror. I felt sprays of things, and I knew that it was bodies next to me, just sprays of blood or sprays of body part or bone. Things were cold and wet over us. And after what felt like an eternity, which was probably 15 minutes, I don't know, everyone started getting up. And I said, Shemi, hold on to Mama. Put your head here. Don't close your eyes. She said, why? I said, close your eyes. Don't look up. I've got you. We've got this. We're going. And I stood up and I saw the bloodbath and I saw the disaster and the man next to me with holes everywhere. And
Jessica's husband, Nadav, was at their home a few hundred metres away with their 9-year-old son, Lev.
I tried calling Jessie. She wasn't picking up. And I was like, I have to go and find her before it's too late.
The shooting had stopped, but he couldn't have known what he and Lev were heading into.
And as soon as we arrived, I could see there were already bodies outside.
but you
the
covered
front.
his eyes. So
Yeah, so as soon as I saw that, I just covered his eyes. I just held his hand and started searching for them. And wherever I saw bodies and people receiving CPR and being treated, I just looked and to see if, hoping it wasn't going to be them. Probably experienced the highest fear I think I've ever lived through. I got a call, and that was after a couple of minutes in the space in that field. And I can't tell you my relief when I saw there was Jessie's number and heard her voice. And then Jessie described that they were at the North Bondi Life Saving Club, and so we just ran there.
Minutes later, the family was reunited.
it was just surreal that we could find each other again.
48 hours after their ordeal, Lev has questions for his parents.
He said it's the scaredest he's been in his entire life, and he said to me yesterday, he said to me, I feel like you're not telling me everything. But he has been saying things like, why would someone come to a Hanukkah party and start shooting people?
And what do you say to him?
And I said to him as well that they weren't well, the people that made those really bad decisions, and that there are some people that believe that hurting people will make them happy.
Shemi has questions too.
She kept asking, is there going to be more bing bang?
Bing bang,
today?
she was saying.
Kind of,
bing
that was
bang.
how she
Where are
described the
bing bang?
gunshots.
Why were there bing bangs? And she thought that the festival had organised the bing bangs, and that we were. Why did they trick us? I realised, oh my goodness, she didn't,
Her symbol of that day, the donut she was clutching when the shooting began.
picked her up, and I see her holding the donut like she was the symbol of that. And she said, Mama, I've still got one. And it was just the most tragic, sort of beautiful symbol of her excitement around this treat.
It's impacted everybody, far greater than the Jewish community, In the Jewish community, we feel more targeted and more that there's all of this fundamentalist hatred and anti-Semitism, and yes, all of that. But in Bondi, I really feel like a sense of some of the innocence that's been destroyed for everyone. This is everyone's playground. This is everyone's beach, and just seeing the number of people coming to offer flowers from all walks of life, from all nationalities, from all faiths, it just reinforces how, as humanity, we're all feeling it.
Australia's gun laws will be strengthened after the Prime Minister held an urgent National Cabinet meeting in the wake of the Bondi terror attack. But gun advocates argue it won't make Australia any safer. Alicia Thomas-Sam reports.
Bondi gunmen Naveed and Sajid Akram were armed with high-powered, long-arm weapons, legally sold for hunting and target shooting.
They were legally registered, so they were approved by the New South Wales Police.
I just cannot understand the rationale to justify people in Sydney having access to firearms. It beggars belief that is it allowed to happen.
50-year-old Sajid Akram owned the guns used during their rampage. Today, New South Wales Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon confirmed he'd held a gun licence since 2023.
Mr Akram was entitled to make an application. The information that was available at the time was used to assess that information and a licence was issued.
So one of the shooters had a Category B licence, which is a high-powered military-type grade weapon used for the shooting of feral pigs and feral deer.
Any firearm is dangerous in the hands of the wrong person.
Australia introduced tough gun laws in 1996 after 35 people were shot dead at Port Arthur in Tasmania. At the time, federal, state and territory governments agreed to ban semi-automatic rifles and introduced a buyback scheme which took 650,000 firearms out of circulation.
There was an agreement very quickly put together by all the states and territories to agree to a minimum set of requirements for the use and possession of a firearm. That covered a whole range of things from licensing to possession to storage, sale, transfer, a whole range of areas, and they set minimum requirements. All the states and territories agreed to that.
But 3 decades on, and the number of guns in the community has risen to more than 4 million. Last night, every state and territory agreed to tighten gun laws even further.
And I'm determined to bring in the toughest gun laws in Australia, and they'll be significantly tightened in New South Wales.
I very much look forward to working with Premier Minns, the Prime Minister and other premiers as we explore what we can do to continue to tighten firearm laws in Western Australia.
Victoria will be working with other jurisdictions to move at the earliest possible moment to bring about any changes to the laws here that will be done in concert nationally.
Sajid Akram legally owned 6 firearms under the terms of his licence. Following last night's National Cabinet meeting, each state and territory is now considering a cap on the number of firearms held by any individual. Also limiting ongoing firearms licences and the types of guns that are legal.
We think it can go a lot further. We think there should be a review of the genuine need and the genuine reason to have a firearm. We think that there should be a review around children using firearms.
In some states and territories, children as young as 12 can apply for a junior firearms permit to legally shoot. Gun safety advocate Stephen Bendel believes this is unacceptable.
The National Firearms Agreement says that no one under the age of 18 should have a licence to use a firearm. Every jurisdiction has a workaround by giving children permits. So right now, today, a 13-year-old is not allowed to use Facebook, but they can legally use a firearm under the supervision of a legal firearm owner.
In March, Western Australia introduced the strictest gun laws in the country. Lever release and button release firearms, which are designed to fire repeated shots more quickly, are banned, and hunting licence holders are limited to owning 5 firearms.
I think the way Western Australian laws work, we should be proud that these laws do exist here. So in this particular instance, perhaps that could not have occurred here.
Well, I don't think you can say that. I just don't think you can say that because Western Australians are as vulnerable to radicalisation as New South Welshmen.
Tom Kenyon is the Chief Executive Officer of the Sporting Shooters Association of Australia. He argues restricting gun ownership won't prevent acts of terror.
Over the last 10 years, people have used trucks, they've used cars, they've used explosives, they've used knives, they've used illegal firearms, they've used legal firearms in the commission of these terror attacks. The problem is not the weapon, the problem is the radicalisation of the individual.
In 2019, Australia's domestic intelligence agency, ASIO, examined gunman Naveed Akram's ties to a Sydney-based Islamic State terrorism cell.
And that information wasn't communicated in an effective way to New South Wales Police, it appears. It also appears that if it had been transmitted, that it wasn't acted on.
Today it was revealed in the month before the Bondi attack, the father and son travelled to the Philippines.
The fact that these two allegedly travelled to the Philippines, quite possibly for some form of training, and then returned without that causing raising any eyebrows or causing any communication between the federal and state governments, is also an issue. The number of rifles they had is meaningless in compared to that.
Even if one firearm is removed from society, that is one less that we have to worry about.
More than 100 shots were fired at Bondi. In most states and territories, there is no limit on how much ammunition a gun owner can buy.
So the restrictions, certainly in the Sydney metropolitan area, regional and rural might be different because they need it for the culling of feral animals, but certainly in the Sydney metropolitan area, there should well be restrictions on access to ammunition.
Ammunition limits are a really tricky thing. And the amount of ammunition you have is not necessarily indicative of any intention that you might use it for.
Today, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns pledged to move quickly on new gun laws for his state.
I would say pre-Christmas. Logistically, we're working with our MPs to get back into Parliament as soon as possible. I don't want to speak for the Coalition. I think we'll be in a position to do this together.
Former Prime Minister John Howard was at the helm when Australia introduced those tough gun laws, but today he warned that the push to tighten them further could divert attention from the need to address anti-Semitism. In a moment, we'll speak to Labor MP Josh Burns. First, here's 730's political editor, Jacob Gruber.
Thank you very much. Your heart is strong. Thank you. Your courage is inspiring. Thank you very much.
Face to face with Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a Sydney tobacconist originally from Syria, who spectacularly threw himself at one of the attackers during Sunday's chaos, disarming him.
I thanked him for the lives that he helped to save, and I wished him all the very best with his surgery.
The Prime Minister acknowledged for the first time that the killings appeared to have been inspired by Islamic State.
Radical perversion of Islam is absolutely a problem. ISIS is created by an evil ideology that has been called out, not just by the Australian government, but globally as well.
As more details, footage and witness accounts tumble into the public realm, the political heat has only intensified. Former Prime Minister John Howard, who led Australia's response to the war on terror more than 2 decades ago, blaming the government for not doing enough to combat anti-Semitism.
There's little doubt that since October the 7th, 2023, not enough has been done by those who command authority and respect in our society to prevent, cauterise and denounce the spread of anti-Semitism.
We have taken the report from the anti-Semitism envoy, and what we are doing is busy implementing it.
The horrors of Sunday have been a brutal wake-up call for leaders around the nation. A manifestation of the darkest fears of Australia's Jewish community, which has been saying for months and years that it feels increasingly threatened. There's now a rush by governments to respond, starting with tightening John Howard's gun laws.
We have to do gun control. It's incredibly important that we fight anti-Semitism. And one of the things about anti-Semitism is that it begins with hate speech, then it might be a chant at a rally, then it moves online, then it becomes graffiti on a Jewish building, then it's malicious damage, then arson, and then it escalates.
I do not want this debate, post this horrible event, to be used, the focus on guns, to be used as a pretext to avoid the broader debate about the spread of hatred of Jewish people and anti-Semitism.
There's also been criticism that the government was too slow to adopt recommendations intended to curb anti-Semitism by the Prime Minister's hand-picked Special Envoy Gillian Segal.
That needs to be picked up by this government and implemented in full. The entire government, the entire cabinet needs to be tasked with its implementation.
Siegel's plan includes fining universities and media outlets that allow what Jewish leaders have condemned as a permissive culture of anti-Semitism.
When mothers talk to me about those days where they don't feel they can take their children out of the house because they've woken up to something hateful online, when chanting in the streets seems to have some sort of permission structure that allows people to talk about a global intifada, which means bringing bloodshed to the streets of Australia, much, much more needs to be done.
Nearly in every campus there is a so-called dedicated building where the Jewish students can study in a more secure atmosphere. This is insane. And it's also very important to remember that when we're talking about the Jewish community, we're talking first and foremost about Australians, Australian citizens.
While the government is exposed over its response to Siegel's recommendations, it's unclear how some of them would have prevented Sunday's attack. Authorities have indicated the gunmen were lone actors, and sources have told the ABC that investigators are now examining their ties to an international jihadist network after discovering the pair travelled to the Philippines.
I think we've been fairly clear that the reason that the Akrams travelled to the Philippines, where they went, is unknown at this stage and subject to the investigation.
The AFP boss making her first public remarks since Sunday's events.
Jewish Australians were hunted down in broad daylight at an iconic Australian beach. The suspected murderers, callous in how they allegedly coordinated their attack, appear to have had no regard for the age or ableness of their victims. It appears the alleged killers were interested only in a quest for a death tally.
The attack has reprised the immigration debate, with Coalition and One Nation figures demanding action against Islamic fundamentalists entering Australia.
It's not about the guns, it's a person behind the guns.
I won't be elevating any further discussions about what you call a debate about migration, but I am hearing from people who are saying we want to make sure that the values that have made our country strong, that we hold so dear and so close, are held by those who want to come to this country.
There's no question that Sunday's terror and the blame and anger it has unleashed threatens to become a test of Australia's cherished social cohesion.
I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to embrace. I'm here to hug the community, to hug the Australian citizens that care about life here in Australia and care about the Australians of Jewish faith.
Labour MP and member of the Jewish community, Josh Burns, joins me now from Melbourne. Josh Burns, welcome.
Good evening, Sarah.
What do you want from the Prime Minister in this moment?
Well, first of all, I just want to recognise and pay my respects publicly to the people who have been killed, and there's more details that have come out tonight, and it's been an extremely difficult 48 hours, and I know that my community is absolutely devastated right now, Sarah. So I just wanted to make that point and say that we need to rise to this occasion, and we need to recognise that we are in charge. And it is our responsibility as members of the government to meet this moment and to stamp out anti-Semitism, because what has happened here to a community that I love and a community I've grown up in, that has turned to this country, that has provided a safe haven for our people, is just devastating, and we need to restore that.
You said that the progressive side of politics should have done more, should do more. Are you essentially blaming or holding your own tribe responsible for the rise in anti-Semitism?
Let me be very clear, Sarah, that right now we have a situation where anti-Semitism for the last 2 years has been on the rise in Australia, and we need to meet this moment and confront it in all of its different manifestations. You know, there is no such thing as trivial anti-Semitism, Sarah, and what I want to see is that people in leadership positions right across the country, and especially us in government, accept responsibility and take this moment to confront it in all of its different manifestations, whether it's at university campuses, whether it's on our streets, whether it's online. Obviously, our security agencies have a crucial role to play in all of this. But I think that for anti-Semitism to be on the rise for the last 2 years, and for the Jewish community to be desperately crying out, warning all of us to say that this can happen and this can escalate, well, it has escalated and 15 people have lost their life, and we now need to use this moment to turn our country focused on combating anti-Semitism in all of its forms.
I want to understand how you see that escalation, if I could, Josh Burns. There have obviously been a lot of comments from the Jewish community over it's just 48 hours. I appreciate that, and we need to take the debate very gently at this point. But those comments link the terrorist attack in the way that you just did to the increase in anti-Semitism. I think the word you used was escalation. Others have called it the inevitable consequence. I want to understand how you see the connection between that rise in anti-Semitism and a terrorist attack.
You know, when I first heard about this on Sunday, Sarah, my first call wasn't to my colleagues, it was to my family. You know, it was to my mum was going to take my daughter to the Melbourne Hanukkah event, and I just wanted to make sure that my family was safe before I then called the Prime Minister's office. You know, to really understand what it's like to be a Jewish person in Australia is to walk into a community function through security gates. It's to walk into a Jewish school via armed guards who are there to protect kids. What we want in Australia, and what the Jewish community rightly is calling out for, is to have a place where, just like every single Australian, our country and our community can be a place where we can participate in Australian life and express ourselves freely. But what's happened over the last few years is that Jewish kids have stopped wearing clothes that have identified them as Jewish, because if they don't, they get screamed at in the streets. That people have had people have had their synagogues burnt down, people have had cars set alight, and what's worse is that often there has been a justification of that somehow the Jewish community deserved it, that somehow in Australia it was a legitimate target for Jewish people to be the focus of it, and it's not, and it needs to stop. And I think when we gather right now after the worst terrorist attack on Australian soil, what this can be is an opportunity for our country to actually collectively come together and say that we will stamp this out in all of its different manifestations.
I'll come to the question of what the government should do in just a moment, but just to stay with that question, obviously we're learning more about the perpetrators of this attack, and a lot more information will come out. We understand that they had long-time associations with supporters of Australia's pro-Islamic State network, as well as we learned today from reporting they attended a militant training camp last month in the southern Philippines. So these men appear to be radicalised terrorists. Would any action taken in Australia to combat what we have seen in the rise of anti-Semitism here have had any impact on a mind as distorted and base as that?
There's a couple of points to make. First of all, clearly these people had the means to carry out an attack. They had guns and they had training. That was the how. But the why is what we also need to confront, Sarah. The why did they choose to go to a Hanukkah event to kill Jewish people is something that we need to confront. And not every act of hate results in violence, but every bit of violence starts with hate. And it starts with dehumanising one another, and it starts with not accepting and embracing this amazingly multicultural and beautiful country. And so I would say that obviously there needs to be a full investigation of what has occurred here, how these people had the weapons, how they were radicalised, how our security agencies responded, and what can we do to improve those processes. But also we need to ensure that across society the hate and the anti-Semitism that we've seen needs to be confronted as well. And there cannot be an instance of anti-Semitism that people walk by. There is no such thing as trivial anti-Semitism. And I want to see us all collectively use this moment to embrace each other and to say that we won't stand for it, we won't walk past it, and that we won't be bystanders.
Do we also need to re-examine where we landed on hate speech laws, and particularly the room they give to extremist preachers to use religious texts to vilify Jews?
Yeah, I think we do need to look at incitement, and I have been speaking to my colleagues over the last little while about how we can strengthen protections against incitement and where incitement occurs. It's not just in sermons, it's also on our streets and it's also online. It's also in universities, it's also in cultural institutions, it's right across society. So yes, there has to be greater protections clearly against incitement, and I think the Jewish community isn't, obviously the worst of events happened on the weekend, but it's also been just such a tiring few years of, even my own office, Sarah, was attacked. It's been just so difficult for having life in Australia, and to make the point that the Jewish community loves this country. What this country has meant for the Jewish community is everything, and people have given so much and contributed so much because of what this country has given the Jewish community. And I think we all can just appreciate it and look to restore the harmony and the incredible place that Australia can be.
I asked you at the beginning what you wanted from the Prime Minister. One question is, should the Prime Minister be more explicit about what elements of the anti-Semitism envoy's report he specifically endorses and/or doesn't endorse?
Well, I know that work's going on right now, and there was implementation of some of Gillian's report already, but clearly we need to speed this up, and clearly we need to bring the suite of reforms to the table quickly. What I'd like to see is a timeline and a set of an agenda around how ideally National Cabinet will work together to combat this in all of its different manifestations, whether it's building on the education piece that Gillian has spoken about so that people understand the history of the Jewish community and how the Jewish community has played such a wonderful role in Australian society, but also around how it will be confronted in different institutions and how anti-Semitism will be stamped out across society, how we can boost protections by our security agencies, but also culturally, Sarah, how we can collectively come together to embrace each other, to celebrate multiculturalism, to say to the Jewish community that this is your home, that Australia is your home, and that we are all here for you as well. And I think that is something that we as a government need to continue to work towards, because it's not just the guns are crucial. That was the how, but also the why needs to be confronted as well, and that is anti-Semitism.
Josh Burns, you've been through, as you say, that's the word, a deeply confronting 48 hours. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah.
That's the programme for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your company. See you tomorrow, I hope. Good night.